Hank, it's so nice to finally meet you. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Maya, great to meet you too, virtually anyway. And yeah, excited to be here and have a chat.
Well, I'm very excited to have you as my guest. This is your first time appearing on Lawbreak, and I have to say it's my first time actually interviewing a police officer,
Um,
a homicide investigator. So that's pretty stressful, I have to say. But I'll do my best not to ask you stupid questions. And my apologies if I do, but at least it's not a cross-examination context, so that should be more relaxing. Hank, before we start, let me just say, first of all, congratulations on the book. You have a book that's out. It's called The High Road. It's really very good. I've been reading this book, and honestly, it's just so interesting. And we're going to be chatting a lot about this book. But before we talk about the book itself, I just wanted you, with your own words, to introduce yourself.
sure. I'm Hank Idsinga. I'm a 34-year veteran of the Toronto Police Service. I retired in January 2024 after 34 years. Joined the Toronto Police Service in 1989 at the young age of 21 and spent 10 years working in 14 Division, which is the west side of downtown Toronto. I got my first promotion and went to 51 Division for 5 years, which is the east side of downtown Toronto. And then in 2005, I joined the Homicide Squad as a detective, and I never left. I spent 18 years there, first as a detective and then promoted to detective sergeant. And then in 2018, I was promoted again to inspector, and I ran the homicide unit in Toronto for the last 5 years of my career. And like I said, I retired in January 2024. On paper, physically, I left Toronto Police Headquarters in September of 2023 and never went back. So I've been happily retired for about 2.5 years. I do media commentary. I do some true crime series. I teach at Humber College and very part-time. And I've written a book,
Well, and
right? So,
that's a pretty intense project, and that book is out now. And well, one thing that I wanted to start by asking, Hank, is why did you write the book?
you know what? I don't think there's any police officer who's worked a good amount of time in downtown Toronto who, at one point in time or another in their career, hasn't turned to somebody or thought to themselves, I should write a book. Like, nobody's going to believe this, some of the stuff that we see and do.
Yeah.
And, seriously, I retired from the police service. I had no intention of writing a book. And then a publisher reached out to me from Simon and Schuster, and they asked me if I'd be interested in writing a book. So I had a meeting with them in late 2023, and the editor and the publisher from Simon and Schuster Canada, and they wanted a book much like you probably don't remember, but we had a police chief named William McCormick who wrote a book about his time in homicide, and they wanted something similar to that. A lot of homicide stories. And I said I would do it. I said, but I would write a memoir, and it would be framed by my family's story and my grandfather's story and my mother's story and why I got into policing. And it would finish off with my time as the inspector in charge of the homicide squad and being exposed to some of the dysfunction and racism as well within the senior ranks of the police service. So now I know you're more interested in the true crime angle and the homicide stories and the corruption that's ongoing now. So I won't get too much into the my family background or anything like that. But that's what the book is all about. I think it'll appeal to a lot of people, and the response so far has been nothing short of tremendous.
Yes, and it's actually getting a lot of media attention and coverage because of actually just one chapter, basically chapter 26 of the book, which is also not one of the longest chapters. I think it's only 5 pages, but it was pretty, it did. strike a nerve here because a lot of people are talking about this chapter where you talk about your experience. Again, everything is rooted in your experience, and what you felt was anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism within the Toronto Police Service. And this is now triggering a series of investigations, I think, on the part of the authorities, uh, as there should be investigations going on. But it's interesting because the timing of the book is coming at a time which is not very good for the Toronto Police Service, where they have been dealing with a series of, I mean, I don't know how to describe them, but maybe like bad incidents, or one of the main ones being the Project South that kind of revealed that there was some corruption going on within the force and even involvement in crimes by some police officers. So let's get dealing with the media reaction to the book, Hank.
You know what? The media reaction, I've been nonstop since April 22nd, when the first teaser of one of my interviews with CBC was aired on that Wednesday morning, and it was an absolute firestorm for the first few days. A lot of media outlets had already interviewed me in anticipation of the media embargo being lifted and the actual release date of April 28th. And it actually, the book itself started shipping out of Indigo about a week and a half before it was supposed to. And the media embargo was jumped a little bit by some of the outlets, so everybody was scrambling to get their articles and stories together and get it out there. And then, of course, there's some response from the Toronto Police Service as well, the command officers there, which, in my opinion, wasn't very well thought out. And it's kind of turned around now to recently, a couple of days ago, we had the chair of the Police Services Board saying some very positive things and really repeating exactly what I've been saying in the media over the last week and a half, that there's some real problems with the structure and the culture of the police service, especially in the senior ranks and the command ranks, that enabled and empowered some of this behavior to go on and protected it. So I'm optimistic that we'll see something done. I'm not completely confident that we'll see something done, but certainly the comments made by the chair of the Police Services Board, I think, are going in the right direction. And it really did shut down the rhetoric from the command of the police service that he's just trying to sell books, and he should have reported this in 2020 when it happened, and he's undermining public trust in the police service because, as you say, with the corruption allegations against quite a few officers over the last several months, I was on a radio show here in Toronto, and the host was talking about that comment that Mr. Idsinga is undermining public trust in the police service. And I didn't even have to answer. The host then just reeled off the number of police officers who've been charged with corruption offenses in the last few months and said, I think they're doing a good job of that all by themselves. And I was like, yeah, I agree. So, and hiding behind that catchphrase of we don't want to undermine public trust and hiding things that have gone wrong, misconduct wise, I think is just going to create more problems in the long run.
So you were inside the Toronto Police Service for many years, Hank. Why do you think this was going on within the force?
Well, I think if reading the book, I try and paint a little bit of a picture and try and put people into uh, my seat, essentially,
Yeah.
right? With here's some of the very early signs of tyrannical behavior in the police college. Here's an incident where, I try and do the right thing, and because some of the supervisors don't, and report a fellow officer for impaired driving. And I'm literally physically assaulted the next day because of it. And Right through to some of the stories I talk about, which aren't even my stories. They didn't happen to me. I witnessed some things which would allude to anti-black racism, but certainly I have some stories in there from some black officers.
Yeah.
And I don't even put all the stories in there. There's more to it than that. And I put a story in there as well about breaches of confidentiality when it comes to PTSD in the wellness unit, again committed by some senior officers. And then I put the stories about the anti-Semitic comments in there. And I found it fascinating that the initial police response was to kind of gaslight me and say, you should have reported this, and you're undermining public trust, and you're just trying to sell sell books. Yet nobody is saying the same thing about the black officers who related those stories to me, or the officer who related the story to me about the breach of confidentiality. But because I said something about anti-Semitism, I got targeted. Now, obviously, it was all related in my book, but I think that really convinced a lot of people as well. If you're not convinced by the grandson of a Holocaust victim who relates firsthand comments that are made right in front of him about Jews, then surely the reaction of the Toronto Police Service in itself will help convince you of that. So, like I said, I'm optimistic that something good is going to come out of it, and I certainly hope so. But as a result of the media attention, and even as a result of the police blowback, keeping it live in the media, the book's done very, very well, well beyond my wildest imagination that it would be where it is right now.
Yes. And we will be also talking about the other aspects of the book because, as I said, like this chapter that has been causing a lot of controversy is just one chapter. And it's not like throughout the book you're talking about this issue. It's really just in chapter 26, but the rest of it is heavily focused on the cases, the it's actually a very interesting read for anyone who's a new police officer who wants to learn, who aspires to become be part of the homicide unit. It's really very important for them to read because it really takes a lot of work, from what I see, a lot of effort, sleepless nights. So it's really good. But just to go back a little bit on the police corruption, I mean, is this, I know you've reported some incidents that you felt you've had your own personal experiences and some other officers also related to you, but did you know, were you aware of the extent? Because it seems now with Project South that it exposed that there was something bigger that was going on within the force. Were you aware of that or not really at the time when you were with the Toronto Police?
I mean, since the day I joined the Toronto Police, there's been a constant stream of officers getting charged, for example, with improper use of CPIC,
Hmm.
right? The police information portal. That's been going on since the day I started. There's been officers who have been arrested and charged and ultimately convicted of narcotics abuse. There's been officers, in the last 2 months charged with breach of trust when it comes to computer
Yeah,
systems. And that's a bit of an anomaly. It used to be provincial misconduct charges instead of criminal charges.
yeah,
There's been officers charged for misconduct for racist allegations. There was a female officer in 2022 who resigned and gave a deputation in front of the board about, the problems that she had as a female officer and the PTSD she suffered from and the dysfunction of the internal investigations. So I don't think any of that was a surprise to anybody. I think the extent of it now in 2026 is a
yeah,
bit of a shocker.
yeah,
Um, and you've got access to Canley, and I'm sure you could find dozens of cases over the last 30 years where police officers on the front line in Toronto are accused of lying, and people have gotten their charges dismissed or withdrawn as a result of some of that. So it's been going on for a long time. And the circumstances of Project South. It was initiated with a shooting incident up in
Yeah.
York Region, north of Toronto. And York did a great job, started investigating and started finding all these links to Toronto police officers. So they notified the chief in Toronto, and the chief quite rightly said, all my assets and professional standards are at your disposal. And so Toronto Professional Standards also got involved until ultimately in January, February, when we started seeing the arrests and the search warrants executed and the charges laid. So um, I don't think for a second, and there's even some rhetoric. It's okay. We got the bad ones, right? They're arrested, they're charged, but we're a police service of 6,000 uniformed
Yeah.
members. If you think six Toronto police officers are the only ones still doing that, and that's proven true in the last 2 months. Like I said, there's been two other officers arrested in the interim and charged with criminal breach of trust for unauthorized use of the computer systems. And this is just something they have to constantly stay on top of, but it's certainly nothing new.
But what were the like the heads of the Toronto police doing? Because I mean, you did mention that this is something that's been going on for a while now. It's not new. Maybe it's the extent of it is what is a little bit surprising now to the public. But like these incidents have been happening for a while now. But what were the police, what was the force doing to address those issues? Because it doesn't seem like there was anything that was done. It's like they were aware that there were breaches of trust, that there were some inappropriate use of data, but what did they do? Was there anything systematic that was done at the time?
Well, you know what? There's audit systems that are put in place, and there's random checks that are put in place. But obviously, it's not helping. I mean,
Yeah.
right around the time we had Julian Fantino as chief, which is 20 years ago now. I could be wrong on my dates, but he instituted inspection teams from professional standards who would do random checks around the divisions and check on computer systems. But that was ultimately disbanded as we started to get into the money crunching years where we were having hiring freezes and promotional freezes. But something like that obviously could be very effective if it's run properly. But you're even hearing now about some police forces, they don't give their officers access to some of the data systems. You have to go through a centralized clerk to do that. So does that handcuff officers who are trying to do a good job and using it for legitimate reasons? Like, I mean, when I was out on the road, my mobile data terminal, I was constantly checking license plates or seeing somebody that I knew on the street, known drug dealer or a break and enter type person, and I'd check them on the computer right away before they were out of my sight. See, okay, are they on any charges, any conditions, anything like that going on right now? So it really would handcuff police officers a little bit if you took away that access. But if you can't solve the problem through audit trails and inspection teams, then perhaps you should be looking at something like restricting that access.
Mhm. And have you heard any updates about Project South? Because I don't think we've been hearing much recently, and which is a little bit concerning because we know that there's something that was going on pretty serious, and we want to follow up. I mean, members of the public want to know. And I think there's something that I discussed with Alison Craig, who's also a common about the concern is, well, we don't want this investigation to disappear and that all of a sudden, like we don't hear anything about Project South and that they try to resolve it in a way that the public is not aware of that. So, do you have any insight? Are you aware of anything that's going on? Is it still ongoing, the
Oh,
investigation?
it's still ongoing, and I hear rumors, and obviously there's a publication ban
Hmm.
for the officers who have been charged and the allegations there. But I would think looking at it from an investigative perspective, York Regional Police conducted this investigation and ran a rather large project for a long time and would have a lot of information that now the investigators from Toronto Professional Standards would have to go through to see if there's any more charges that they can lay, probably under the provincial legislation and misconduct charges there. So it'll be very interesting to see what misconduct charges are laid
Yeah.
against who, and it'll be very interesting to see if any supervisors are held accountable.
Yeah.
Uh, Probably should have seen or noticed or done something about some of this behavior that they're alleging. So it's only been a few months, and I know the folks at Professional Standards are certainly swamped with an awful lot of work. Um, I would imagine we haven't seen the end of this. And like you said, I hope it doesn't get buried in court. Um, we had a very large scandal about 20 years ago with the drug squad out of Toronto, that dragged on and on for about 10 years. And at the end of it, the charges were stayed. And the public still isn't privy to an awful lot of that investigation
Yeah.
or an awful lot of those allegations, right? So, but I think a lot of the people in the public are not that concerned about it. They want that police force. Are you going to be there when I call 911? Right? And they're aware that all of this stuff is going on in the background and whatnot. And they're like, yeah, okay. Hopefully they have things in place to take care of that. We have the defense lawyers to challenge in the court system. I think there's an underappreciation for the court system in some areas of policing. But your average citizen is still going to be, no matter how much distrust they may have in the police, over the years, when they need help, they're still going to call 911. And so every
True.
interaction, right? I mean, uh, we have no choice, right?
True. But in the same time, if the police that you're calling when you're in distress is helping criminals or helping,
Yeah,
let's say, the people who's, causing crimes or, like that's a problem as well, because it does go to the heart of the relationship of trust between
yeah,
members of the public and the police. And I find that's what's the most disturbing about this whole project is that it revealed as well that police officers are using information about people just randomly, not related to cases. Like, why would a police officer check the background information of someone that they, like that they're not investigating? Like, that's pretty disturbing, especially that we don't always give the police all the information that they have about us. So, if you have my
yeah.
information, I trust that you're going to be using it, for legitimate reasons, not because you want to, like for any kind of criminal harassment purposes or other purposes. But Hank, is there a problem in training within the force?
I think training, and unfortunately, we see training come up all the time, especially when you have inquests or judicial reviews of
Hmm.
major police incidents. And one of the things you'll see it in the recommendations for every single coroner's inquest into policing issues that's ever been done in this country. And one of the recommendations is always better training.
Hmm.
And um, I joined the police force in 1989, police service in 1989. I spent 5 weeks at 3 weeks at the Toronto Police College, and then 9 weeks at the Ontario Police College, and then another 5 weeks at the Toronto Police College. So you're looking at just 4.5 months there essentially, and you're put out on the street and you spend 10 weeks with a coach officer, and then you're out on your own. And I even talk about the one story in the book where here I am, I'm by myself for the first time, and there's a stolen car sitting in a parking lot with two individuals in it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what do I do?
Yeah.
Right? It's very intimidating. It's the same thing when I started in homicide, right? I
Hmm.
started in homicide in February of 2005. And it wasn't until December of 2006 where I said, okay, I'm comfortable enough now. I think I can handle being the one who picks up the phone when the
Yeah.
call comes through. And even then, the very first case where that happened, I'm lucky I had a really good unit commander at the time, and I could call her and say, "Here's what I'm dealing with. Here's what I'm doing. What do you think?" And bounce ideas off of her. So, no matter how much training you have, even if we did like some European countries do and say, "Okay, you need 2 years," our police college is a 2 year endeavor, or the FBI, which requires agents to have a law degree, you're still going to have, let's hypothetically say, 24-year-old Hank Idsinga with all 2 years of training behind him and a law degree behind him. Is he going to know as well as 50-year-old Hank Idsinga what to do in certain situations? He doesn't, just that experience, and you would see it too in the world of law, right? A 25-year-old lawyer
Yeah.
versus a 50-year-old lawyer. In policing, when that citizen calls 911, they don't have a choice as to who's going to show up,
Yeah.
right? It might be that police officer who's extremely well versed and extremely well trained and was the top of his class through every part of the training, or you could get the police officer who barely squeaked through any of this showing up at your front door. So that's why it becomes so important to every interaction where the police have to develop that trust, right from the call taker who answers the 911 call to the officer who shows up to the detective who's assigned to the supervisor who supervises the detectives and all the way up. So that has to be earned in every single interaction. I don't think that trust is a given anymore and probably hasn't been for a long time,
Yeah.
especially in some of the communities like the Black community in Toronto that have been stomping their feet and kicking and screaming for the last 40 years about inequalities in policing in Toronto. Um, so to enhance any more training, officers spend an awful lot of time training throughout the year for their entire career, right? I still had to go back to the police college every year for a few days of training and requalification on the firearms and whatnot. That really never ends. Do I think it could be done better? Yes. Do I think there should be better accreditation processes for different units and different fields of police work? Yes, absolutely.
Well, and one thing I can add as well is because I've been reading your book. Your book is actually good because you're giving your experience basically of all not a police officer, and I'm not training to become a police officer. I'm a defense lawyer, and even for me, I've learned so much from reading your book. So I really think that for any police officer who's working, it's not just for new ones, but anyone who's working who wants to improve, or especially for new ones, like reading the book is really very a good tool for them to learn because you're giving your experience. Obviously, I mean, you have a lot more than what's in the book, but in this book, there's a lot. You talk about a lot of cases that we have. And in fairness, I know like the media have been focusing exclusively on almost exclusively on chapter 26, but there are 27 chapters, and the vast majority of the chapters are about various cases, very serious cases. And I do want to also talk especially about when you start talking about the murders, the homicides, um, there were two cases that I found extremely disturbing, and it's when the victims in both instances were women, females, and had indigenous roots. And I thought the murders in these cases were particularly brutal. It was very difficult to read, and although this is my work, I do defense work, and we're used to that, but still, it was just so brutal, and it just showed how much it just feels like there was so much disdain for indigenous women in particular. So tell us more, Hank, because I do this work from a defense perspective, but here I was reading this from your view, and you discovered the bodies and you saw them, and it's just like it was horrible. So if we can talk a little bit more about these particular cases in more detail and from you directly.
Yeah, you know what? I think the cases that you're referring to, number one would be the Caitlin Sampson case,
Yes.
and number two would be the Spring Phillips case.
Yeah.
So, the Caitlin Sampson case, I mean, Caitlin was a 7-year-old girl who was murdered by her caregivers in August of 2008 is when she died, and she suffered for about a year and a half leading up to that of some pretty horrendous abuse. Now,
Yeah.
Caitlin was. Um, I believe she had a little bit of indigenous
Yeah.
heritage through her mother and her biological father, but her biological mother ultimately couldn't take care of her anymore.
Yeah.
In May of 2007, handed her over to her best friend, who was indigenous and who had herself just a horrible upbringing on the native reserves in northern Ontario, and you know, some stories of some pretty horrendous abuse that she suffered as she was growing up. And she was with her common law husband, and they started to raise Caitlin, but of course they started to abuse her pretty badly as well. To the point where Caitlin passed away in August of 2008. So I go through that one, and that's really the one chapter where I really kind of contemplated, should I even put this one in here? That was a tough one. That was a tough
Yeah.
case. It was very traumatizing. It was traumatizing to an entire community and neighborhood in Toronto. And at one point in time, and I say this in the book, where I drove up to one of the native reserves to interview a witness, and some of the issues that I dealt with that witness and with that native reserve, and the policing situation up there, and just life up there, which was very, very bleak. So I got a little bit of insight into that world through that investigation. And it's the one investigation, if I present it as a case study, I've had people walk out of it because it is very disturbing, it's very
Yeah.
traumatizing. So I'd even caution people reading the book, that's a tough chapter. It
It
really,
is.
really is. And then the Spring Phillips case, of course. Again, Indigenous woman, doing pretty good for herself in the city of Toronto, had her own apartment, and was dating a Indigenous man who was living in a men's shelter in Toronto, and he was actually on conditions because he had assaulted her in the past, um, not to be around her. And so he goes home. Well, sorry, he invites a buddy of his over one night who's on the streets, who's Indigenous as well. And he ends up staying to sleep on Spring's couch. And the boyfriend goes home, and he comes back the next morning to find his girlfriend deceased, you know, horribly beaten, sexually assaulted, and left for dead. And we located a witness, and based on timings and whatnot, I mean, she was probably beaten viciously for a couple of hours before actually succumbing to her injuries. Um, and we got that guy into custody within about 12 hours or so. Um, and it was a pretty strong case of first degree murder, but ultimately the Crown took that plea to second degree murder with no possibility of parole for 22 years, which is pretty darn close to what you're going to get for first degree murder
Yeah.
anyway. So, but again, seeing the how everyone involved in that case really, really struggled uh, in the city, and even our accused coming from the East Coast and really, really struggling through his childhood and upbringing before coming to Toronto. And he was a very, very talented soapstone carver. And in his backpack when he was arrested, he had been working on a soapstone carving. And I think the defense lawyer involved in that still has that soapstone carving to this day, sitting on her desk as just a reminder, because everyone was really, really affected by that case,
Yeah.
and how traumatizing it was as well. So I had one other case that kind of peripherally involves some Indigenous players in that as well, but Really, really, like I said, traumatizing cases, and really, really sad to see some of the circumstances that people live in.
Yeah, I mean, I can say just from reading them, I haven't seen what you've seen. You were investigating these cases and you were, like seeing directly like the evidence. So it must have been 10 times more intense. But just reading the chapters, I thought they were so heavy and so intense. And it was just brutal to read all of that. But it is important to read and it is important to learn from you. And I think one of the things that I think a lot of people want to know from you, Hank, is this type of work is extremely intense. And actually, you talk in the book about how, like it's sleepless nights, you're working all the time. When you finally feel like you're going to have an hour or two where you can sleep, the pager goes on and then it's up to the next case. So it never ends. It's nonstop work. And I think for people who, especially newer cops who want to know how did Hank do it for so long? Because you were with the police, Toronto police, for decades. How do you do it for so long with this level of intensity nonstop?
Yeah, I talk about a few stories, even when I was a uniform constable, about some of the ungodly hours that you had
Yeah,
to work. I mean, shift work is bad enough on its own. But I relate the story of one Caribbean Carnival weekend when I was a young uniform officer, and we signed up for extra hours on the Friday night. It was supposed to go to midnight because we had to be back in for 6 o'clock in the morning for the actual parade the next day. And you think that's okay, if I get 4 or 5 hours
yeah.
sleep, I'll be able to handle that. And
Which
then lo and
already is
behold,
not enough, like four
not
hours of
enough.
sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. And lo and behold, you end up working till 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
So you go home, you grab 45 minutes of sleep, and you come back in, and it's pouring rain, and so you're soaked to the skin with your
Yeah.
bulletproof vest on and everything. And then the sun comes out around 10 in the morning, and it's blazing hot, and your head is pounding, and there's not enough water to go around. So tough times like that. A lot of tough times sitting in small rooms with decomposing bodies as a uniform officer, and really, I think, climatizing you to what awaits in homicide work.
Yeah.
And even then, homicide work, I mean, I talk about one uniform experience where we went 24, 36 hours with an investigation, which was really unusual because uniform guys, they really clamp down on the overtime and they try and get you out of there as soon as possible. But I had a couple of those experiences early in uniform, but then homicide, it's great because the bulk of it is Monday to Friday, day shift. But when you're on call or if you're on a case and you're going 36, 48, 72 hours sometimes without a break, it becomes really, really tough. And I talk about the Kenneth Mark case as an example in late 2009 and into 2010, where we went 2.5, almost 3 weeks of, starting off with 3 or 4 days with no sleep, going home and starting to get a few hours of sleep every night. And that went on for 2.5 weeks. And then we had to go up to Ottawa
Yeah.
and we were in Ottawa way later than we planned, and we had to drive back at 5:30 in the morning after being up since 5:30 the day before on 2 or 3 hours of sleep to begin with. And I found myself, I woke up in the middle of the highway, stalled out in the car, right? So roll down the windows, continue driving. And then I finally get home in the evening of that day, and the phone rings, and
Yeah.
we've got your guy. You got to come up to Ottawa to get him.
Yeah.
And I start putting my suit back on, and I remember it was 7:30 at night, and my wife is like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, "I
Yeah.
got to go back to Ottawa." She says, "No, you're not," and she had to physically stop me from getting back in the car and going up to Ottawa. So I think having that drive and that addiction to the work is great to make a good homicide investigator, but sometimes saner heads need to prevail. There's another case in there that I talk about where it happened on a Friday evening, and of course you're up since 5 o'clock in the morning, Friday morning. You get home, you're about to go to bed, the phone rings, back into work, and we were chasing the guy, trying to track him. And Sunday afternoon rolls around, and we're still there. And my partner was smart enough to say, you know what, I'm going to call somebody else in, and just so we don't make a stupid mistake, because our brains are mush.
Yeah.
And but you still want to keep going, but
Yeah.
you just want to make that bad call, right? So that's what you can expect in homicide work. And there were a lot of people better at it than me. There were a lot of people who could run more hours than I could run on their investigations, but it's tough, it's draining, it's mentally tough, and it's physically tough.
It is. And we can feel it like when you're describing all the work that goes into it in the book, we can see that it's really intense. There's a lot of work. But what I could also sense from reading the book is the drive that you mentioned. We can see here, anyone who reads it can see that you have this passion for your work and the drive, which is really very nice. I mean, this is what you want to see in policing. There's another incident that you mentioned. I honestly love that when I can't remember the name of the guy who he had some mental health problems, and you were dealing with him not as an accused, but at some point he was accused of something, and people didn't know how to deal with him. He was very difficult. But then you were called, and because you had that connection with him, you were the only one who was able to communicate with him, and he was fine with you. I
Yeah.
love that story because this is how you want your every police officer to be, to have that connection with the public and to have this, to feel that, oh, it's Hank, and he called you Hank because he knows you and he just felt safe with you, and then he was fine. I love that story. If you can talk a little bit more about that, and why are we not seeing more of that these days? It feels like we don't really have that much connection right now, which is very sad because that's what I want from a police officer as
And
a
I
member
think,
of the community.
in all fairness, I think we do still see an awful lot of that and awful lot of really excellent police officers out there. But it's becoming very, very tough in 2026 to build
Yeah,
those interpersonal relationships. And it's the same thing between members of society building those relationships. And it's the same thing when it comes to police officers and members of society building those relationships. I mean, that particular incident that you're talking about, and I talk about it all the time because of the mental health aspect of
yeah,
it. But we had this fellow who was under the care of the review board, the Ontario Review Board, and he had to go back and forth to the mental health center in Penetanguishene, 2.5 hours north of Toronto for his court appearances. And I was working in an office where it was our responsibility to bring these guys back and forth to court. And it just he was a character.
yeah,
We had a great relationship. Spending hours in the car together, back and forth, and chatting a lot about his life and my life and my partner's life. And we let him smoke in the back of the car,
yeah, yeah,
right? And my partner was a smoker, so I didn't like it, but it made him happy. And then, months later, after I had last seen him, I get a call to the Queen Street Mental Health Center, which was a secure facility at the time and part of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health these days. And they're having problems with a patient. And I
yeah,
had no idea who it was going to
yeah,
be. And there was no backup available. So I went into this secure facility by myself. And I still remember outside of this patient room were a bunch of doctors and nurses and security guys, and they had the tonfa sticks, the police sticks that had the handle on them,
yeah,
standing there, and they're standing outside of this room. And I'm like, what's going on? And this guy is refusing to be restrained, and we need you to help us restrain him. And I poke my head in there, and it's the same fellow. And I said,
yeah,
hey, and he's like, oh, hey, Hank. And I'm like, what's going on? And the doctor's like, don't go in there, don't go in
yeah, yeah,
and whatnot. And I'm like, I'm okay, I got this. And I just go say to him, what's going on? He says, they won't give me my breakfast. I'm
yeah,
not, they give me my breakfast. I'm not eating. Sorry, I'm not letting them restrain me. I'm like, okay, can you guys get him his breakfast?
yeah,
We'll get him his breakfast. bring him his breakfast, sit there while he eats his breakfast, and then, yeah, okay, now you can restrain me, right? It was a funny little moment, and I use the analogy quite often in my media commentary, and I say, you know what, police get criticized an awful lot for their handling of mental health calls, but I'll tell you, who do the doctors call when they need help with a mental health patient? It's us,
And this
right?
is, yes, and this is
Yeah,
actually a really nice example of that. I really loved that chapter when I was reading it, and I felt like we need to hear more stories like these about, the interaction between the police and members of the public, because this is, what we all want police officers to be doing, to feel that we can rely on them, that we feel safe and secure. And I feel like from reading that chapter, that's how he felt with you. You were the only person that he could open up to, and he trusted. And that's because there was that relationship of trust,
yep.
which I find, again, I'm talking from my perspective. I feel like there's a little bit of a like that trust is a little bit broken between the public, and I see it through my clients. I mean, as a defense lawyer, I can
Sure.
definitely see that there is a little bit of this broken trust between the police, but I hope that this can be rectified and that it will get better. I'm optimistic. I like to be optimistic in general. And I find like stories like that in the book are really very nice. And this is a book, like it's not a fiction, it's a real life book. You're talking about your own experience. And again, just a reminder, there are 27 chapters where you're talking almost exclusively about the work. And it's really very fascinating to see all the intensity of it and how you were dealing with it. But I do also want you to tell us in general, Hank. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but if you can give us your thoughts on what you think you would like to see now for new police officers, some things that they need to really focus on to become like, what does it take to become a really good police officer? And if you also aspire to get into homicide, what does it take to do?
And yeah, and the short answer is give my book a read.
Yeah.
It's I like I said, I teach part-time in a local college, and day one, I always go around the class and each student, what's your name, where you're from, and why are you here? What do you want to do? And those who want to be police officers, and I've had students stand up and say, I want to be a homicide investigator. And okay, I can spend an hour talking to that student about here's what it takes, and here's how you get there, and here's the road you have to travel to get there. But now I think I've condensed it into that book. And anybody who stands up and says, I want to be a police officer, where do you want to be a police officer in Toronto? Okay, here's what you can expect. Here's what you're going to experience. And, I write in the book there, I've been spat on, I've been urinated on, I've been defecated on. I've sat for countless hours in small rooms with decomposing corpses that are so bad that the coroner won't even step into the room. And I've had mothers of murder victims break down in front of me, and having to restrain them so they don't harm themselves anymore. And I've had mothers of murder victims screaming and telling people, don't talk to the police, and having to rebuild that trust with them so I can conduct my murder investigation properly. So you really have to have that drive and that motivation to do the job, and not just do the job, but do it properly and well. And don't take the easy way out, because nothing
Yeah.
scared me more when I was a young uniform officer than the thought of being in court, getting cross-examined, and being caught by a defense lawyer taking a shortcut or lying about something. Because you're going to have a really bad day when that happens. So I
Mhm.
always wanted to maintain my credibility. And that's probably the number one thing that I preach, is that your credibility is everything,
Yeah.
because once it's gone, it's gone. You're not getting that back. Right. And it was really, really nice. It's my uh, book launch party. I had a Superior Court judge show up. I had a provincial court judge show up. I had several lawyers show up, including defense counsel, including Crowns. I had tons of media personnel show up, not to write an article about the event, but just because I had developed those positive
Yeah.
relationships with them over the years and the positive relationships with members of the public I developed over the years. So, unfortunately, all it takes is a few bad apples to ruin that. But there's a lot of, like I said, really, really phenomenal police officers out there doing some phenomenal work. Be one of those police officers. Take that high road and put the extra effort in and do your job the way it's supposed to be done. So it's not easy, um, but it's far easier than doing it improperly and getting caught with your pants down as a result.
And what about having a good relationship with the defense bar? Because I mean, naturally, there is a working and good relationship with the crowns because you're on the same defense and the police. I think we can work much better on a case when there is a good connection and a good working relationship, but that's sometimes very difficult, I find. But you are respected by a lot of criminal defense lawyers as well. So, if, let's say, like, what is one piece of advice that you can give on that to develop a good connection with the defense bar?
Yeah, you know what? It is an adversarial
Yeah,
system, right? But the adversaries really are Crown and defense when it comes to the court process. And the police officers are there, they're the investigators. You conduct your investigation, and if you uncover evidence that's inculpatory or exculpatory, you disclose it and you recognize where the investigation has to go from there. So, I've got several defense lawyers who are very good friends to this day. I even talk about one particular defense lawyer in the book where I have these figures on my shoulder watching everything that I do. My former partner, one particular Superior Court
yeah,
judge, and one defense lawyer. And I always, how would that guy
yeah.
attack what I'm doing, right? But I had a great relationship with him, and probably learned more from defense lawyers while I worked in homicide than I learned from anybody else. So, uh, absolutely, there's some defense lawyers I don't like at all.
Yeah, I can
Uh,
imagine. Yeah.
right. And I'm sure there's some defense lawyers who don't like me at all. That's fine. It's kind of the nature of the beast, but I always tried to have that positive relationship. And I always even had tried to have a positive relationship with people that I arrested for murder. Right. And I put in the book there that one of the last things I'd say to them before I close that cell door would always be, we're going to see an awful lot of each other over the next couple of years. I'm going to be sitting 4 feet away from you in the courtroom through any preliminary inquiry or trial process. And I'll be civil to you and say good morning. And if you want to return that favor, then by all means, right? And 90% of them did that. And there's a few that absolutely refused to do that
Yeah.
and just carried that on through and through. But I'd say I always tried to have the same relationship with defense lawyers. Um, they might be attacking me all day when I'm in the witness box. One day, I'll still come in the next morning and say, "Good morning, counsel," and how was your day? And had some fun with that too. I could tell you some stories that aren't in the book where you know you could almost torment each other sometimes through the process. So, but at the end of the day, I always try to have good relationships with everybody.
Well, speaking of torment, though, I do have to say, and I need you to explain that to me, Hank, why do a lot of police officers write horribly? Like, it's such a torture to read sometimes. Some police, like, that is probably one of the most frustrating parts of the job is having to read the handwritings of some police officers. I'm just
Yeah.
asking because it's very common. And it's frustrating. Is it on purpose? Do you guys get trained to do that to give us a hard time, or is it?
No, but absolutely, some police officers will do that specifically to give you guys a hard time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no bones about it. My handwriting isn't the greatest, but it was always legible and um, I mean, there are a couple of times because obviously, as the major case manager or a primary investigator in a murder investigation, I would have to decipher some of those notes too.
Mhm.
And there was the odd time where I'd send it back to the officer and say, "Can you please type these out for me?
Yeah.
Give me a transcript."
Yeah.
Because I can't read it all. So
Yeah.
I feel your pain there, and like I said, absolutely, some of them will do it just to torment you
Yeah.
guys. Um,
And you can tell. Sometimes, honestly, you can feel like this is not normal handwriting. Like this is made specifically to just give the defense lawyer a hard time. And it's like I can't read them, but then when I ask the crowns, they're like, "Well, I can read it, so there's no problem. I don't know what your problem is." I'm like, "Well, no, I can't." Like it's just
yeah.
look at it. So
Yeah, I think eventually we'll get to electronic notes. I mean, body cams as well also
yeah,
alleviate a lot of that.
that's true.
So that's kind of work in progress, but electronic notes especially would help. But a practical way of doing that, I think, still eludes us in the world of policing.
Well, you mentioned body cam because this is something that's relatively new now with the police. It's not every police force, at least in the East region. It's only recently that they started implementing that. But that really changed the game a lot for policing. So, what is your view, though, on that? Because I think many of the cases that you did in homicide, that was before there was body cam footage. So, if you can just give us your take on that. I'm curious to
You
hear
know what?
what.
Yeah, the police force in Toronto, when they were first trying to bring the body cams in, they recruited me for a promotional video to be shown to all police officers about how good body cams are.
Hmm.
Because I had a murder case in 2012, I think it was 2012, that was solved because the police officer who pulled my suspect over a couple of weeks before the murder had a body cam.
Hmm.
It was no body cam, it was a dash cam on his police car, and that captured a fob on this fellow's key ring that he twirled around as he was speaking to this police officer outside of his car, and it helped prove the case. So they use that as an example as to how good body cams are and dash cams are for policing. And I think by and large, the vast majority of police officers now would say, yeah, that saved my skin on
Yeah.
numerous occasions because, you know, I talked in the beginning about the number of times I probably said to myself, I've got to write a book. Nobody will believe me in my career. And the number of times I got in the witness box in court and turned to the judge and I said, Your Honor, you're not going to believe this,
Yeah.
but here's what happened. And, you know, usually they did believe it, but I can imagine now, if you don't believe me, hit play.
Yeah.
Right? Here it is on tape. So I see them as nothing but a good thing. I don't like the fact that police officers lose that privacy while they're working because they're constantly on that cam or on the cameras in the car, but it's also captured some pretty reprehensible behavior because they don't realize that it's on. But I can't think of any other occupation where you are constantly being monitored electronically, maybe through emails and keystrokes, but certainly not video surveillance as to
Yeah.
absolutely everything that you do, including social interaction with the people that you're working with in the scout car. So it's sad that it's come to that, but you know, from a professional standpoint, it's nothing but a good thing.
And to end here, Hank, do you think that do you have because I like to be optimistic. Are you optimistic about the future of policing? Do you think that there will be some good changes? That maybe the exposure of what was going on behind the scenes that a lot of people, especially the public, wasn't aware of, that would maybe help things improve, and that will get back to a better connection with the police?
I hope it does, and I'm eternally optimistic. And I'll say I have no regrets about my choice of career, and I have
Yeah,
no regrets about anything in those 34 years. I still think it's the greatest job
yeah,
on the planet, and I had a blast. I would do it all over again, right? And writing the book has certainly uh, brought out a lot of good memories. It's rekindled a lot of old relationships with police officers I haven't seen for decades. Reaching out on social media and connecting. And if they take some concrete steps, like I said, unfortunately, the rank and file officers take the brunt of the criticism and the blame for doing things on the street or in investigations. And my message is don't think it stops at the rank and file. It goes right up through through the ranks. And there seems to be less accountability the higher up you go in the ranks. And I think that's something that needs to change. And I hope that this book and these media appearances help propel that change forward. So policing is not going away. Uh, Policing has been around for hundreds of years,
yeah.
and we're pretty good at it when we want to be.
And I echo what you just said. Like it's really good to read this book. Whether you're a police officer or not, I'm a defense lawyer, and I was learning a lot of things from reading it. And it's just really interesting to read. I'm just like I've enjoyed reading the book. And again, congratulations. And it is not just about chapter 26 for everyone who's watching this. Read the whole thing. It's really very there. There's a lot of action, and there's a lot to learn. And again, for me, what I really admire is your passion and your dedication because we can feel it. I mean, I was feeling it as I was reading it, and I love that. I like to see someone doing what they love and they're passionate about, and to feel it while reading your book is actually something that is really. It made it more interesting to read. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It was very nice to meet you, and I hope to meet you in person soon as well, Hank. And again, good luck with everything that is happening with the book. And maybe we'll have another part. Maybe you'll have something to write about more or some other cases that weren't covered here. It will be really very nice to read more from you. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me on, Maya. It was a real pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.